Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today is a phenomenal young brother that I recently had an opportunity to hear about his journey, his story, and I knew that he would be a blessing to have on our show, and so I invited him accordingly to do just that. This young man is a consultant, he is a speaker, he is the founder of the Hemp It Forward organization, and he is a visual representation of what resiliency looks like. Somebody who's been through a challenging time that he's going to share with us, but he didn't allow that challenging moment in his life to be the ending of his story, but instead he's used it as an opportunity to be a blessing to other people. So this man of God is a powerful young brother who is allowing God to use him in a mighty way, even through the midst of what was otherwise been an adverse, challenging moment in his lifetime. And he's, again, using that as an opportunity to be a blessing to many as he can reach out to. So without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, please let me introduce to you, I have the honor and privilege of doing so, Mr. Cody Guy. Cody, thank you so much, my man, for being on the show today. Appreciate it.
Hey man, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So before we jump into our core of our conversation for today, I do want, of course, to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do with the audience. Just kind of give them a taste of who Cody is.
Yeah, so I was born here in Dallas, actually. Hold on, somebody's walking in front of my house, in my yard. So sorry. I don't know if they're gonna knock on the door or what, but yeah, edit that out. I'm Cody. I was born here in Dallas. My dad had a restaurant he opened up in Florida. We moved from here to Florida, and I grew up there through elementary school, through middle school, into high school. I had ended up coming here to Dallas to bring my mom back so that she could see her mother. Her mother had dementia at the time, and I know that she felt bad about her dad and not being here for her dad when he passed. So when I found out her mother was getting worse, I decided I want to go ahead and move her back over here. And so we got back over here. My mom had great 5 months with her mother, and then her mother passed. A week later, I went into the hospital with a big old brain tumor. So, yeah. So basically, I started out in Florida, grew up there. That's who I consider myself more of a Florida boy than a Texan. So, yeah. And ending up here, though, is, of course, where I got sick and then had to go through chemotherapy, radiation, all the classic stuff from a cancer diagnosis. At the time, I was working, and at the job, I was speaking with people and taking an order, and all of a sudden I couldn't speak right. I was like, no, no, and I had this really weird rush of they call it an aura now, I know. A big rush of, like, you can't really describe it, it's just an electrical feeling. For me, it feels like I'm falling backwards, and then there's like water splashing on me. But it's what you feel before you have a seizure. And so whenever I was working there, I bolted to the bathroom, and the last thing I remember was bending down to grab the trash can because I was nauseated and I felt like I was going to throw up. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in the lobby of the restaurant, and I got, vomit on my chest, and they told me that they had to kick in the door to be able to get to me because I'd already locked the door in the bathroom after going in, and that I was standing facing the wall looking up, and I don't remember any of that stuff. I just remember whenever I came to their dining room. So yeah, it's a short little thing, just Dallas, Florida, back to Dallas, and then brain cancer. The usual, usual stuff.
Well, not quite usual, but I do appreciate both your transparency and you taking it, as light as you can be in the midst of the seriousness of it, obviously. But and we're going to delve into that a little bit more. Because we know, of course, this is the core of the story that you were going to share with us today about your cancer diagnosis. But if you would, when we talk about your childhood, before the diagnosis came about, what was life like for you prior to finding out about the cancer diagnosis? When you're growing up, what was being here in Dallas? Like you said, Dad had a restaurant and things of that nature. What kind of talk to us a little bit about what childhood was like for you in general pre the cancer diagnosis, any fond memories that you have or things of that nature that you experienced in your growing up?
Yeah, totally. So here with this side of the family, my mom's side in Dallas, it's big. So it's a Hispanic family. My dad's white. I'm half Mexican. So, like aunts, uncles, got six aunts and one uncle. And then my mom actually is one of those six sisters. But anyway, um, yeah, here in Dallas, I don't really remember much of it, but I remember all the holidays and all the get-togethers and gatherings. Because now I know we meet together every Easter for everybody's birthday, for the main holidays, anything and everything. We pretty much get together for as a family, and so that was whenever I was here. And then I remember when we moved to Panama City, he had opened up that restaurant, and it was in a totally new place, new environment. I remember standing at the beach, and I was like, "This is the end of the U.S. Like this is the end. This is the border. Like I know I'm looking out away from the United States." And I was only like 5 or 6, well 6, and so yeah, everything was fun in Panama City. Regular childhood, going to the beach. The restaurant was like right across the street from the beach, not on the beach. So I could just go and play on the beach anytime. The school that I went to was far from the beach, 5 miles inland, and it was really small. I think we only had like 200 students, if that. And so basically, the community there on the beach is like 19 miles long and only like a mile thick or a quarter mile thick. Mm-hmm. And as far as like streets, and so it's really just a small little elementary school. I don't know why I feel like I'm going to cry. Maybe it's just the medication I just took, because I just took some medication. I'll just open up about that. Some of the medication I'm on are mood stabilizers, but they're used for seizures. Maybe just thinking about all this and opening up about all this has kind of brought this teariness about. But I'm going to go and get through this, and I'm going to tell you the story because that's what we're all here for.
No problem. Take your time. Yeah, no problem.
Totally. Appreciate it. Yeah. I don't even know why I'm amongst them all. But, so yeah, whenever I was there, I was in 5th grade, and my dad got diagnosed with colon cancer. And he'd been diagnosed prior to that, but whenever I was, like, I wasn't born yet, he was in his 30s. And so, that was basically the end of Panama City. Like, I was there in 5th grade. I mean, like, from 1st grade to 5th grade. It wasn't that long, but it was awesome because I do have those fond memories of the beach. Like, and the reason I consider myself a Florida kid is because of that beach environment, even though I was only there for 4 or 5 years on the beach, because that's kind of whenever I had my time to. My parents had the restaurant, and I was able to run around and do whatever I wanted to. Not completely, but I'm just saying, like, I had a lot more freedom than a normal kid that would go home after school. So that freedom, and then having the beach there, and the friends that I had there, and the restaurants and the businesses around us, all that was awesome. There was a beach store on the opposite end of the shopping center where my parents had the restaurant, and I would go over there and just hang out there all day with the people that owned that. And they had a bunch of just beach stuff, little trinkets and stuff that I was too young to understand at the time. Like things that you would go into a beach store and find all the funny stuff, the keychains and T-shirts and all that stuff that you would find at a beach community. That's what I was looking at. I just didn't know any better. And we had a Domino's next door to the restaurant, well, like a street away. And I would go over there, and they would pay me a small pizza an hour to go there and make pizzas. So I would just leave the restaurant, and I'd go over there, and I would like make pizzas at Domino's for the orders that were coming in. And then I'd show back up at the restaurant with like like a stack of 3 or 4 pizzas from being over there for a couple hours. So
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool for a young kid to be able to experience that.
Yeah.
Wow. And again, I can only imagine too, like you said, that beach life and being a kid, your first exposure to, I can think back to the time I first got exposed to, what a beach looked like. And it's just exciting and just fascinating. And as you said, being a kid to run free like that and just feeling like it's just sort of a refreshing, invigorating type of a vibe to have, even as a young child. And like you said, you didn't understand all the particulars of everything that was around you and going on, but it was still, at that age, it's just, it didn't even matter. I'm just having fun and I'm just enjoying life, and it sounds like, for the most part that was pretty much your experience. And And please tell me if am I correct in saying that prior to your what would later on be a diagnosis of cancer, did you was there any semblance of I don't know, warning signs in terms of health issues or anything like that prior to such a thing taking place? Years later, did you have anything like that, or did you pretty much have a relatively healthy childhood?
Yeah, I had a healthy childhood. I know that my dad, his father had died from colon cancer, and then my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. For the most part, during the time in Panama City, I was totally oblivious to it all. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was in elementary school. And then whenever we moved, once he got sick, I was more aware, of course, of life, death, disease, all that stuff. They gave me a colonoscopy immediately. I came out clear, but I realized that I had like a hypochondria kind of that went through. I didn't notice it until like looking back, and I was like, dang, I was like afraid of everything back then. Like not afraid of everything, but if there was something that I was sick or an internal pain or something, I'd be like, I now remember when I was a kid, I was thinking, oh, it might be cancer. And so that was like an issue in middle school, for sure, because that's whenever he had gotten sick. I was in 5th grade, and starting sixth grade in a new city, we moved from Panama City to Gainesville, Florida. Shands Hospital was willing to take on his case because it was already he was stage 4. They gave him 6 months to live, and but Shands was willing to take him on, and they're a teaching hospital there at University of Florida. So they went ahead and took on the case, and so when we moved to Gainesville, like we were living out of a hotel, and then out of what they call Hope Lodge. It's basically a Ronald McDonald house. It's for adults. Whenever we came in from out of town, we weren't sure if we were going to close the restaurant or not. And so we stayed for about a month or so in this Ronald McDonald type house. And he went through all of his treatments, his chemo, his surgeries, and such. And being there with him through that, like I didn't realize that I'd be going through something like that later. It doesn't affect me like, oh, I feel so bad for myself or I wouldn't do so much. But even just thinking about a child, having to think of that outside of myself, not even me, but some other kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cool.
Right. I mean, that's...
But, yeah. So that's kind of like the basis. So before I ever even started having symptoms, I already had that fear. But let me see. I think a lot of that fear left whenever I started learning about Jesus, learning about the Bible. My high school teacher reached out to me and started talking to me. I was wearing t-shirts, band t-shirts at school that had pentagrams on them and flaming pentagrams and like flames down the arm and everything. And I remember he called me up one day and he said, "What's going on at home?" And that was the beginning of the relationship that I had built with him. But really, he was my Paul. Like I was Timothy to him. So it worked out great. I actually saw a lot of healings. I pray for the sick; they've been healed. I've been prayed for; I've been healed. Instantaneous, not like over time. Like, oh, he recovered faster. But like instantaneous stuff. So whenever I did start experiencing the symptoms, I was like, God's got me. God's going to heal me. And so I was just so strong in that. And that, like, he's healed people before, he's healed me before, and so I'm going to trust that he's going to heal me again, and God's going to heal me, and this and that. And what I realized later is that I was trusting in what I'd seen and not in a relationship with him. That I was holding on to something that was not was part of my experience, but I was basically holding on to something that wasn't a real relationship with him. It was a relationship or an experience with something else, from somebody else. Like learning what I did from that man, Mark is his name, and seeing how Jesus walked through him and how he allowed Jesus to live through him and not his own self, was what really grew me up in Jesus. And it was during that time that I was seeing these things, that I was confident from that time period in Gainesville, Oh yeah, let me go ahead and go back real quick. So I met Mark in Gainesville in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and Mark was the one that really reached out to me, started talking to me. He was my world history teacher, and he had a house church. His dad had a house church. They started out with a bunch of students, and then the students wanted to just start meeting on Sundays. And so he had a house gathering. We met on Wednesdays and Sundays. And so there I got to see a lot of house. I got to see a lot of deliverances in the house, demonic deliverances, things like that. And direct healings and all that kind of stuff. And this was with college kids that would come in from nowhere. Like they would just be college kids. One night we had a college kid ask for prayer for his grades. We prayed for him and he started flipping out, all kinds of crazy stuff that, what you see in the Bible, what you hear about in the Bible. And so whenever I got here to Dallas, when I started having symptoms, that's when I was still basing all that on that, was that I'm going to be healed. He's going to heal me. And so I didn't go in for treatment initially. And so I just was like, no, he's going to heal me. He's going to heal me. And then I ended up losing some of his hand. And I was still like, no, he's going to heal me. He's going to heal me. And I took it all the way to the hospital and ended up in the hospital and ended up having to go through all the treatments and all the different tests and stuff like that at the end of the day. But I learned through that, the experience that I had was because I was relying on that older house church, the things that I had seen taking place in that house church there, and not directly on him, a personal, real relationship directly with him. It was more so of a reliance on that prior experience.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Let me
yeah.
first say I'm just truly appreciating your transparency in this journey, and so I applaud you for that. I know that this is not an easy subject to talk about, but at the same time, I'm also excited, if you will, about just how God worked things out, even leading up to your diagnosis. It was like,
Yeah.
here you were, this young child being exposed to this disease, if you will, something that your dad having to deal with,
Yeah.
and watching that all play out, not really fully understanding it at first, but nevertheless being exposed to it. And so you get to see all of the inner workings that come with that. And then here's this teacher who decides that he points you out and he decides that he wants to share God with you. And he wants to introduce God to you and give you an opportunity to begin the process of building that relationship with Christ and being able to actually not only build the relationship with Christ, but to actually fellowship with other brothers and sisters who are also trying to build that relationship with Christ, and being able to witness the power of prayer and being able to witness healing and other miraculous things that we know, as believers, that God is capable of doing. You were being exposed to that and getting filled with that at a very early age. Again, still not yet knowing what was going to lie ahead for you, but it was almost like as if it was preparing you. It was preparing you for your own individual moment in time when you would deal with it. And then, of course, as we'll get to later on in the show, ultimately propelling you to do the works that you do today, to be of help to other people to get through the very same things, the very same challenges and such. So I'm just enjoying just the journey building up process. And again, I appreciate your transparency in sharing all of this, because I think it's important for our listeners to see that, while the things that may happen to us, over the span of our lives, we may not always understand it. It may not always be the best timing. It may not always feel good, but there's a purpose in it. And it's clear that God was building you up. He was setting the table for you in that relationship between you and he, to be prepared to do the works that he would have set forth for you to do in the years to come. So I think that's a wonderful thing for us to focus on and make sure that people are grasping, this early stages of your journey here. So with that said, let's kind of transition to that, because as I understand your story, you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were 20 years old, I believe, when you got you officially were diagnosed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're 20 years.
20. Yeah. Well, no, I was just out of high school, moved my mom over here, and it was 20. So.
Mm-hmm. So you've already explained earlier, what you were doing at the time when this episode takes place, and then you wake up and realize, clearly something wrong has happened. You're already feeling some kind of way. You don't remember quite all the details in between, but nevertheless, something is wrong. So I know you said that this whole rehab process, if you will, the radiation, the chemo, the surgeries, and everything else. Kind of walk us through what was that process like, and actually how long? I know you said it was a long time. Like, how long did you have to go through those early stages of just dealing with this? Knowing that I have this disease, and how did it affect your day-to-day living? Like, what were you now either not able to do, or at the very minimum, what were you now struggling to be able to do as a result of this diagnosis?
Oh man, that was a lot. So in the beginning, when I first got, had the symptoms and all that, I didn't know what was going on, and then I had the seizure, and that's whenever they did the MRI, and they said, "Hey, you have a mass in your brain." And so we went ahead and went through from there, because my dad's history with his side having the cancer, his dad and him, we went ahead and did a total body workup. The neurosurgeon, surgery, and internal medicine were fighting in order to get into my brain. So neurosurgery just wanted to get in and take it out. They believed that it was a primary brain tumor. And the internal medicine, because of the family history, believed that it could have started in the colon, and I really had colon cancer that had migrated to the brain. So that was quite an experience, about a week or so of one test after another test, endoscopies, colonoscopies, scans, like different types of CTs, MRIs. They did spinal taps. Like, they were really going in there and looking at everything. And looking back, I'm thinking they might have just thought I was a project to be worked with because of how far they thought that I was gone. Mm-hmm. And so I'll get back with that on some of the radiation stuff. But the time that I spent in the hospital was pretty much all treatments. I mean, not treatments, testing. And you go in, you go for the surgery. Because of my faith, because of my confidence in my dad, my eternal Father, I was at peace, and he kept me at peace. And there's a scripture for that he keeps those whose minds are stayed on him in perfect peace. And so I didn't think about anything else. I didn't look anything up, and I just focused on the treatment, what I was dealing with, like, not the treatment, but the literal situation in the hospital, day in and day out. Like, okay, here, take the blood. Like, I was just going with the situation and trusting him in the long run. And so whenever I went into surgery, I told my mom and dad, because it's easy to pass on the table. It's easy to go that way. It's I'd rather go on a table than any other violent way. So I told my mom and dad, I'll see you on the other side, whether I wake up or all that kind of stuff. So they wouldn't be back. I woke up, of course. They told me it was a 6-hour surgery. They were able to get nearly all of it. As far as they were concerned, it's pretty much they got all of it out. It was a slim rim that they have. And I sent you some of the pictures of the MRI, and the dark spot of the MRI is the hole directly after the surgery in the hospital. So they do the surgery, and then they send you in for an MRI right afterwards. And so the brain hadn't yet had a chance to kind of like restructure or remove and fill back in. But so the hole was so prominent. It was so, you can see it so well. The size of an ice cream scoop. So you can see where the hair loss is. This is all radiation burns. And the surgery line, though, is right here. And so it comes down. You can barely see it. They did a really good job of it. But I guess they pulled here, they peeled forward, and then they went in right here where this bump is where the screw's at. And then, of course, you can see the patterns from here, from, like, clearly here. Another blast here. And there's the picture that I sent you with all the colors that are coming in from angles. Each one of those colors correlates to a graph. And on the graph, all those colors correlate to a specific intensity of the radiation in those different spots. And so my radiologist told me that he was really encouraging, actually. He was a Muslim doctor. His name was Dr. Ramsey Abdul Rahman. So we all called him Ramsey. So it was cool because, like, we both played on each other's faith. Like, we knew that we didn't believe the same thing, but we both knew we had faith. And so he told me, he said, do not look this up. Do not ask anybody about it. Just keep coming to your appointments and eat it. And that really, I believe, is what, like, I mean, if I would have learned everything about it at that time that I know now, it would have been really hard to just go with it. It could have been more difficult for him. No, it would have been. I mean, I didn't know anything about the life expectancy until like 10 years later. I was at a table with a woman, like a whole dinner table. And this woman was talking about how she was a cancer biologist. And I said, oh, so you know about GBM? And she said, oh, do you know somebody that had it, like past tense? And I said, yeah, I did. And she said, oh, it's about a 14-month life expectancy. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, thank you, Jesus. You know, like, I mean, people were already, I had doctors, and I haven't had one recently, but I had doctors come in and shake my hand whenever I'm at my radiologist appointment. Like, not even after the treatments themselves, but since then, after I have my MRIs and stuff every year, they have a follow-up MRI. And I've had doctors say, oh, I want to meet this dude. So, because I'm 17 years out. I'm the longest living, surviving glioblastoma patient at UT Southwestern.
Wow.
And because everybody dies so quickly. And that's what I was saying. I think that they just thought, like, hey, this kid's going to pass. We're just going to, test everything on him to get as much clinical data that we can off of this opportunity, which I understand. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the route they went with it. And my radiologist told me that he was going to blast me as hard as he could, and we wouldn't be able to do it again because neurological necrosis, which is whenever your brain tissue basically falls apart. So, yeah, that's why the hair never came back. A lot of people's hair will grow back, but this one didn't. And the amazing miracle part of it for me is that they blasted me right here, which is where your frontal cortex, your frontal cortex is, which is where your personality is, and how you think, and your intellect, and all that kind of stuff, your memory, all of it. And he hit that, and he hit all the way around the sides. I had to sign a piece of paper, a lot of papers, just around personality changes and all those different types of things. And depending upon where they're blasting you, it can affect, just because you're getting hit in the brain, it can affect how your bowels operate, because it could be hitting those areas and radiating those areas that control your bowels. So there's all those different types of things that they have to basically be ready for or sign off on. And but I signed off on it, trusting God. And I said, hey, you got this. I don't have this. And this was the second phase of trusting God, I guess I could say. So the first one was when I was hoping. I was believing that I believed. And then the second one was like, I relinquished everything, just put it all aside and surrendered. Because, well, I mean, I didn't have anything to lose.
Right.
So why to hold on to something that, was going to be quickly taken if I passed? And I didn't look at it selfishly like that. It was just logical, like, I have him and I only have him. And there's no reason to fight and try and figure this out on my own. I want him to be able to take the reins, and I can trust him because I've known him, and I've trusted him in the past, and I've seen him pull through for people, and he's pulled through for me. So in the midst of all of it, I mean, I didn't know the stats again, but I wasn't sure what the end was going to be from a basic standard, but I knew that I could trust him as a dad to take care of me. And I know how he took care of his people during the time Jesus was here, that he healed all who came to him. And so I focused on that. I listened, of course, to a lot of different psalms and watched Christian videos and things like that, and testimonies and books, just to stabilize that and understanding that, hey, he does this for his children, like around different people and different ministries that I followed. But Psalm 91, I guess I should say, is really what kept me through that entire situation. You viewers, you can go check it out. But what I did is I uninternalized it, but personalized it. So wherever it says, like, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, I would say, I who dwell in the shelter of the Most High. And just all these different things. Like whenever it says, and I will honor him and give him long life. I said, and you have honored me, and you will give me long life. And so, personalizing that type of prayer was really what kept me focused during that time period in the hospital and after the hospital. I covered radiation. You want me to go into chemo?
Well, I'm not trying to stop your story at all. I'm just fascinated just about again, as you're moving through this journey, how powerful this is. I mean, just a few takeaways that I have up to this point is, I love what you just finished speaking about, how you personalized your prayer. You were very intentional about just not letting it be something that you read, but you internalized it, you personalized it, and claimed it for yourself. And that's the true essence of what takes place when you are in that intimate relationship with Christ. That you're able to do that and you own it. You also talked about your transitioning and hoping. A lot of people don't understand what it means to hope in God, and there's actually two definitions. There's the biblical hoping in God, and then there's the worldly hoping. So like in the worldly hoping in God, it's kind of like we're wishing something to happen, but we're not necessarily, we're doing it because it's something that we should do, but we're not banking on it actually happening. We're not truly believing that is to take place. So it's no different than us wishing that Santa Claus brings us a Christmas present or wishing that the tooth fairy slips some money under our pillow because we lost a tooth. But then you had that transformational moment where you just said, you know what, I'm no longer going to hope that something happens. I'm going to actually give that thing to God and surrender it over to him and just bank on it happening. What do I have to lose? This is a situation that's outside of my control. So for me to sit here and worry and stress and be pressed about it, I'm just going to give it to God and just go off of his promise of what he said in his word that he would do. And one of those things is about, is about healing. That we know that he's a doctor that's never lost a patient. So what better doctor for you to rely upon than your father, as you said, my father, God himself. And I loved that proclamation that you made in that regard. I think that's very, very powerful, and people need to not sleep over that, not brush over that. That is very meaningful, very intentional what you did there. It's just your story is just fascinating to me, and just your overall approach. And then the other thing too, you mentioning about your doctor, the one doctor, Dr. Ramsey, and you said he was he was Muslim.
Yes.
You clearly are of different faiths, different belief systems, but nevertheless had faith. And so what I love about that moment was that even though you may have differences of opinion in terms of your belief systems and faith, God used a doctor of a different faith to speak to you, to relate with you in a way that keeps you positive minded, focused on what was at hand. And he's telling you, don't get yourself caught up in trying to find out all the particulars and details of, what this disease can do and what the lifespan is and all that kind of stuff. Because as you stated, if I would have got caught up into that and read all of the quote unquote negative things about it and how I wasn't supposed to make it past 14 months, whereas here you are sitting here 17 plus years strong, you would have never owned that and believed in it had you got caught up in the data, because then you would have been relying upon what the world said your outcome was to be versus what God says your outcome was to be. And I love that about you. And I love that about that doctor, that again, people of two different faiths were actually able to communicate and work together towards a common good, which in this case, the common good was to make sure that you successfully went through all of the treatments, all of the tests, all of the surgeries and everything else that comes with dealing with this disease. You were able to stay locked in and focused and steadily keeping your faith strong in God, trusting and believing he was going to deliver you through this. And I wanted to make sure that got pointed out as well, because that's a powerful part of your story. And I'm so thankful that you're sharing this, because these are very important details that people need to know and hear about the power of God and who he is and how he works in the most challenging of situations that we find ourselves in. So again, I'll go ahead and let you finish your story up. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to interject that so that our audience is understanding this story is not just a random story. We need to understand the full context of it. So please proceed.
Yeah, it started making me tear up again while you were talking. Because I mean, I knew, like, in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, Dr. Ramsey. But I never thought about it that the orchestration to put two men of faith together, you know, because there's tons of doctors in there that don't have any faith, and they'll actually mock God. Um, it's almost kind of like some professors at colleges. They want to take that opportunity to shove it in your face that look at who you are and where you're at, and where's your God, kind of thing. Pretty much become the accuser. And so it was good that I guess I got a doctor that had similar faith, well, not a similar faith, but an Abrahamic faith to the one God. And yeah, just that he was, dude. Yeah, like that's why I started tuning up. So I was like, dang, I never even thought about that aspect. I mean, of course, I thank God that he was there and all that, but you have Muslim and Christian, you know, the kind of thing. And I have a background with Islam as well, but that's a totally different story. And so, yeah, that's awesome. I didn't even think about that before, so that was making me tear up while you were talking.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. And so, like you said, you were dealing with your last thing you left off in your story. You were talking about you kind of went into the radiation treatments you were speaking about. That component of it and how long did you have to deal with that component?
Excuse me, burping. I believe it was like 5 weeks, and you go in 5 days a week. So every morning at like 9:30 or something, I was at the hospital and radiation treatments. It's and then moves around to another spot. And it changes the smell of the air. So like whenever you're sitting there, you can smell the air smells different, ionizing or whatever they would call that. But yeah, so I went through that. Apparently, there's side effects to the radiation that are also similar to the chemotherapy, like tiredness, nausea and vomiting, stuff like that. That I don't know which was coming from what. And then, of course, I was on the medications, and these seizure meds are very, very strong. I'm on the highest doses, and so it's really a miracle that I'm able to even walk around and talk and hang out with people and do things, because people that I know that are on like half or even less than half of the doses that I'm on are just bedridden. Like they can't do anything. They're just tired all day and that kind of stuff. So anyway, the chemotherapy started at the exact same time the radiation therapy started. So they do it concurrently, I think is what they call it. And so you're doing both at the same time. And with brain cancer, it goes pill form because the chemotherapy doesn't go past the blood-brain barrier. And so the pill form does. I guess they formulate it in such a way that it'll go past it. All the same side effects, nausea, vomiting, everything, as regular, chemotherapy, IV chemotherapy. And let's see what else. Okay, yeah. So during about close to the 6-month mark, I started getting like really sick from it. And I remember I was rushed to the hospital and I had a fever and I was throwing up like highlighter yellow throw up. And it was like, people were like, oh, it's bile, but bile's dark green. Like, this is like highlighted yellow. And I guess it could have been the bile mixed with something else. But the chemo doctor told me, do you want to go? She said, nobody's been past the 6-month mark in the trials. We just, the evidence we have right now for this particular chemotherapy, temozolomide, has only been taken up to 6 months. Do you want to go for a full year? And I said, well, what are the side effects? And she said, leukemia. And I laughed and I was like, no way, I'll die from one cancer, not two. And somebody just came in. She kind of chuckled about it, and she was pregnant at the time. And so, like, during this time period, I was still had positivity. I was still joyful. I wasn't all, like, down and, like, sickly. Of course, I was thin. My jaws were sunken just a little bit. I weighed 117 pounds compared to like 145, 150 prior to that. So I looked like I could be a little sick, but I wasn't chemo ward sick. I didn't look like it. So whenever I would come in, I would try and be very cautious or conscious of the people there that were going through a much harder time. I didn't want to just walk in and pep in my step and all that kind of stuff. But with Jesus, man, I always had a smile on my face. I still always do. So it's like the good news came, and it's eternal. And that good news is the relationship and the peace between us and God. And so whatever I'm going through, regardless of whether or not I'm mad, it still doesn't take away the good news that I can sit in and be happy about. And so um, I wasn't joyful the entire time, but I was confident in what he was doing. I was meeting with a lot of different people, praying for people, praying with people, and I went to several different churches. A lot of just community type stuff that was around me at the time. Um, and so, yeah, I didn't go past the 6-month mark on the chemotherapy, and just decided to finish it off there. And so I did go actually the 7th month, and then that's whenever I stopped it. So I went 7 months on chemotherapy.
Wow. So 7 months ends with the chemotherapy and the radiation treatments. And was this the point of time, I guess, that you were allowed to officially, I guess, I mean, I guess at this point you were already at home, right? You were just having to keep coming into the hospital basically almost every day, at least 5 days a week coming in.
Yeah, for the radiation, yeah.
And so this finally ends. And so now you're just at home, just dealing with just your medications that you would take on your own at that point?
Yeah, the Timidor was at home medications and stuff. I mean, the chemotherapy was at home, but even whenever I finished that, yeah, it was at the house.
Gotcha. Wow, my brother, this is just a phenomenal story, and you are a walking miracle, to say the least. And again, but with God, as you already know, anything is possible.
All things are possible, yeah.
and you are a perfect example of that. The way God has just navigated this journey for you and the healing of your body and allowed you to still be in your right mind
yes,
and being able to, because like you said, even people who defy the odds in particular, health situations, oftentimes don't always come out on that other end still being able to function and do normal everyday stuff. Sometimes they may technically survive it in terms of not passing, but they may be in such bad shape to where they're just existing but not necessarily living. Not able to have conversations like you and I are having and doing, what we would consider to be quote unquote normal everyday stuff that you're able to still do in spite of the vicious attack of this type of disease. So, Cody, what I'm interested in knowing, clearly you've spoken to your faith and it's been everything to you. When you deal with challenging moments, whether it's been the cancer diagnosis or even if it's just something minor, just something regular, everyday type stuff that's a problem, a challenge, an issue, what is usually your routine that you like to go through that kind of helps you to process dealing with those challenging moments? What works for you whenever you're faced with adversity?
So something I didn't mention, or I didn't go over, is that since that time, they tested me for genetic testing.
Okay.
And I do have a hereditary cancer syndrome. The reason my father and his dad had colon cancer is because of the same syndrome. And it's a 50-50 chance of that passing from a parent to a child. And so my sister didn't get it, but I did. Now that she hasn't had it, it will never go down in her system or her generations any further. So none of her genetic progeny will ever have to worry about this. But for me, I do, and I could very well pass it down. And so that's another issue of, like, do I want to have a child? That's like the one thing I've always wanted to do. I'm a teacher at heart, so I'm very much so interested in, raising kids. That's pretty much, I'm always investing in kids, because that's just how I am anyway. And of course I would love to be able to have my own to do the same thing with, but, anyway, the cancer syndrome set me up to where I have the predisposition of developing up to 10 different types of cancers over my lifetime.
Wow.
And not all of them at the same time, and they're all about different percentages of occurrence. And colon cancer is the 80% chance of occurrence over one's lifetime that they'll develop colon cancer. So I get colonoscopies annually. I get the brain MRIs annually. I get an endoscopy to the stomach, because that's one of the other cancers, gastric cancers, every 3 years. And skin checks. I go through a dermatologist every year. They come and they not come like to the house, but I go there. they check all my skin and have me turn around, check behind my ears, all that kind of stuff. So that keeps me in an ongoing status or state of having to not have faith, but be faithing, being in a state of faith. And confidence for healing or faith in healing isn't something that just happens in a place of time. It's a position that we sit in. And so that's where that joy is the the ability to be at peace in the midst of all this adversity will definitely bring joy. And kind of like, watching a fight and watching somebody get taken down that's been the bully. It's like, yeah. So that's kind of what I get to see all the time in my own self and my own life. Sorry, I keep kicking this
No, it's
this
okay.
thing here, stand. Um, so yeah, and like I'm basically, like you say, how do I handle things that I'm going through now? It's like I just had my brain MRI last month, no, August, and I also had the colonoscopy in August. Colonoscopy came out clean, brain MRI came out clean. A lot of people, and even in the beginning, you have a lot of scanxiety, is what people call it. And so, like anxiety over getting your scans, your results. And so it'd be like on the way there, I'd be like, God, please let this be good. Even if it's bad, change the MRI images, like all this kind of stuff that I'd be praying about. And then I heard a guy say, it's not the story of my day. Like whatever I'm going through, and he was talking about his wife falling into a coma. And he got the call when he was on the way to do that. And he said, when I was pumping gas, you wouldn't even know that this was going on because it's not the story of my day. He is. And so I kind of took that on. It's like, this is not the story of my day. I'm like, if I am not coming out of cancer to have any authority or even give it a place, it's not even worth mentioning. So, like, why am I going to elevate cancer by praying harder against it it's basically praying in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got to pray harder because cancer is such a big thing. Like, cancer's no bigger than a common cold. Like, you can have a headache, and to dad, it's nothing. It's the exact same thing as cancer to the kingdom. But to us, of course, it's different, and that's why we pay harder for cancer. What we're really saying is that cancer, you're big, cancer, you're strong, cancer, I'm afraid of you. And so we have to come to that place of where whatever happens, especially with cancer, for my situation, that it's in him, it's given to him. He's the one that has control of it, and therefore I don't have to worry about it because he takes care of whatever he has control of. His stuff he takes care of. And so if
Love
I'm
that.
giving my whole self, my whole life over to him to take care of, then that's where I can rest anytime something comes up in my mind or
Mm,
my heart or anything. Because the enemy whispers too, like, oh,
exactly.
what's that pain? What's going on there? What's going to happen in the next 5 years? Like all those different types of things that the accuser wants to accuse him in front of you for so that you're afraid.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's I love your response to that because again, you're like, and so many of us, even as believers, we do that. It's
Right?
like depending upon the severity of the situation. I got to quote unquote pray harder about
Yeah.
it. How about we just pray on it? We release it to God and we let God do what He's going to do. You already know that you're going to have ongoing tests
Yeah.
and scans and things of that nature for the rest of your life. And so, yes, you understand the power of prayer and you understand the power and the importance of staying prayed up. But what you're not doing is, like you said, in your words, I'm not praying in fear. I've already given
Yeah.
that to God, and I'm just trusting and believing that He's going to work it out, however it needs to get worked out when those moments and times come. So I love that, and having that mindset, I think, is powerful, and it's freeing. For you to not, like I said, be going into those situations or any other situation for that matter. Like I said, worrying and stressing and being all worked up unnecessarily because that's an opportunity for the enemy to creep in and like you
Yeah.
said whisper in your ear and get you all freaked out and worried about stuff. It's like, look at all that I've made it through up to this point. Why would I add more trauma, more challenge to that situation? Even when you spoke earlier about you know if I'm going to go on one cancer, I'm certainly not going to invite a second one to go on. You only
Right.
get no, we're not doing that. We're not adding, we're not claiming, we're not adding anything to this, and I've already surrendered that over to God and I'm just
Yeah.
trusting that He's going to walk it through with me and whatever His will is, let His will be done and I'm going to be okay. So I love that approach. I love that approach, man. So, Cody, if you had an opportunity to speak to the younger version of yourself, that Cody who, first found out, that he, is diagnosed with such a devastating disease, if there was any words of wisdom that you had to offer your younger version, or even you spoke about, talking to kids all the time, if you've had when you have an opportunity to talk to younger people or talk to people in general who are battling similar, challenging diseases such as this, what would be your words of wisdom and words of encouragement that you would share to kind of help them to understand that again, this does not mean that it's the end of your story, that you can still persevere through this. You can still overcome the challenge of it all. You can still stand tall through it all. What words of encouragement would you have to offer for somebody dealing with such a tragic disease such as this, or something similar like it? How to be able to navigate through that?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it would just come back to everything that I've done with myself, I guess, or how he's led me to handle all this is what I would share with somebody else. Just being in a position of, I guess, surrender, really. It's not even I guess, it is most definitely absolute surrender. Because if you're trying to fight for your life, that's kind of whenever he says, you'll lose it, but not in this regard, not with the cancer thing, but it's a good thing whenever you're faced with something that is possibly or likely to be lethal, is that you're able to see clearly exactly what it is that is in your life right then at that moment. Like whenever you're going about your life and you got your job and stuff like that, you're thinking about next weekend, you're thinking about the family, you're thinking about friends, you're thinking about all this stuff. But whenever you have something that comes in your life that's lethal, it's like it slows you down. It makes you really focus on what's really going on right now. And so it resets you. And so whenever people get hit like that, sometimes it can make them angry. It's kind of like whenever you get diagnosed with cancer, yeah, you haven't lost somebody, but you've kind of lost yourself. So there's like these stages of grief, I guess. Same stages. It's like anger. And people get mad at God, but some people do get mad because it's like my cards have been dealt right to me. Like I just got a shitty or a bad life. And, just then they take it out not necessarily on God, but just they hate themselves. They hate other people. The world's the problem. The genetics are the problem. Like in my case. And yeah, they are a problem. But I'm not going to allow them to be the deciding factor in how I live my life. A lot of what I've learned just about cancer is what you put in your mouth, what you can eat, herbs, spices, different things will affect whether your tumors grow or they don't grow. I have a genetic disposition to them, but that doesn't mean that they absolutely have to grow. And so I've gotten into anti-cancer vitamins, anti-cancer vegetables and fruits and juicing and all that different type of stuff. So for people that have cancer that aren't necessarily linked in with a higher power or with God, their creator, their designer, their maker, they can at least, go towards the things that he has made and has provided for us to use for the best that they can to keep their body up and running. I use food as a preventative medicine for the sake of not developing colon polyps. So I've noticed that in the first year I went in with the colonoscopy, not from whenever I initially got sick with brain cancer, but over the years I ended up saying, hey, let's go ahead and do genetic testing. And because my dad. And they did. And so from that time, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but basically, basically the way that it works is that I'm more susceptible to developing cancer, but the genetic syndrome doesn't cause cancer. It just doesn't allow it to not happen so rapidly. So, eating right and eating accurately. I mean, you can eat vegetables all the time, but if you're eating salads that don't fight cancer as much as cruciferous vegetables like garlic and different types of, I don't know, that's a allium family. But so cruciferous and allium families are the ones that highly are anti-cancer. And so I focused on those, and I would encourage anybody that has cancer or diagnosis with cancer on just the practical level to look for those types of foods. Eating those things has kept me hopeful because I know that, hey, I'm eating good, I'm going to have better scans, like I'm trusting God, and, what he's given us is I'm not going to throw myself full of, like, false chemicals and fake things that are going to lead to cancer. And I'm going to focus on the diet that allows my body to heal and is anti-cancer. And so between the prayer, the diet that keeps me more confident, like whenever I'm eating bad, if I go in, I'm always like more fearful, like, oh no, is there going to be a polyp there? But if I'm eating healthy and I'm eating right and I'm eating these types of foods, I'm much more confident and much more at peace whenever I go in. And that's just the practical layer. And that's not even getting into like Jesus and the spiritual side of having a father that does love us, that does want us to be healthy, that gave himself for us to have life and life abundantly. That healing is in the atonement, that he paid for our sins and sicknesses, our illnesses and diseases. And so as a Christian, as a believer, you can rest in those types of principles, or in those, I guess, verses or areas within the Bible that speak towards wholeness of life, as far as spiritual and physical. Like, I can't think of any verses right now, but just verses that speak to us living as his. Can you think of any verses? I'm trying to think of one, just about health, about what we put in our body and how that will invigorate us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know in Psalms and I know in Proverbs, there's a lot of those that are like that, about giving life to the flesh. Yes, that's what it is. Giving life to the flesh and spirit, life to the flesh. What is it? And to the soul, or
Yeah, I know which one you're
yeah,
referencing.
I can't remember the whole verse, but yeah, that's the verse I'm talking about. Man, I wish I remembered it right now. But yes, life to your flesh and healing to your bones. That's what it is. It's in. I think that one's a song.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically just taking in the Word of God, eating the Word of God, and eating the actual product of God. I never knew what it was like whenever, we pray, oh, thank you, God, for this food. And it was always just a thing that we did. But whenever I started growing my own food, it was like, wow, this seed turned into this giant plant. I didn't do anything about it. It was just sun and water and him. And it's like, dude, where's this huge plant coming from? Like, where's all the material coming from for this? Yeah. So having an understanding of food, how it can help you in your daily life if you have cancer, if you want to prevent cancer, understanding how God feels about us, how God sees us, and how he wants us to be as far as healthy. Like, he's on our side. He's not against us. So for any kind of person struggling through anything, especially with cancer, that's the number one thing. He's on your side. And don't pray out of fear, for sure. And yeah, I guess surrender, no fear. And when it's not, you can't just like say, "Oh, I'm not going to be afraid." You have to tell your dad, father, "But Dad, I'm afraid. I'm scared. I don't want to be. I know that you can take this fear from me. I know that you have the spirit of love and sonship, not a spirit of fear. And so if you speak out of, or you pray from what you know you have from him, instead of God, give me this, and say, God, thank you that you have given me this, it's a totally different type of relationship, a totally different type of faith. Because whenever you're thanking him for giving you something, you're speaking from the faith that you have. And it builds you up more and more, because as you see him giving you more things as far as wisdom and health and understanding of who he is, you become more and more confident. So, I mean, I kind of rattled off a bunch right there.
No, you're good. You're good, man. You're dropping some gems, and that was the question that I asked you, and you're hitting all the points that we need to know. We need to be spiritually fed. We need to feed ourselves, from what God has blessed us with, to be fed with, and understanding what things are going to be good for our bodies versus that which is not good for our bodies, not healthy for our bodies, because we live in a day and time where, it's all about the convenience factor, what's ever quick and fast to put together. And more times than not, those type of food items are not good for us. But yet, we consume them, and then we wonder, why are we getting all of these sicknesses and illnesses and problems with our vital organs and things like that. So you're dropping some gems of things that we need to know about and be mindful of, in terms of understanding that. And the earlier in our lifetime that we understand it, the better position we'll be to be able to handle the challenges of life, whether it's something internal within us as far as, sicknesses or whatever, or just dealing with the challenges of the world in general, but, by us being fed by his word. So thank you so much for sharing that. So before I let you go, Cody, I do want to give you an opportunity. I should say, I want to take the opportunity to celebrate you, man, to love on you, to affirm you, to lift you up. And I know you, as I said at the top of the show, you have an organization that is doing some magnificent work, Hemp It Forward. If you would, please tell us about Hemp It Forward, what that's all about, as well as any other projects or anything exciting that you got going on, upcoming, that we need to know about, and how to connect with you, etc. So please tell us a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't know any of this at the time when I was going through treatment, but afterwards I came across a documentary, because whenever you get diagnosed, you start researching stuff. People are sending you things. So you got all these different types of resources coming your way. And I came across a documentary called "What If Cannabis Cured Cancer?" And so I watched that. And in the documentary, they talk about different types of mechanisms, like actual, they call them molecular mechanisms that are used by the body naturally to fight cancer that cannabis also does inside the body. Uh, so the cannabis molecule that gives us the buzz, that molecule is also inside of our body. It's not the exact same shape, but it activates the exact same receptors. So it picks or it opens the exact same locks that our internal body makes anti-cancer molecules for. Um, so just like we have an immune system, we have an anti-cancer system, and it's called the endocannabinoid system because it's based on cannabis-like molecules in our body. So endorphins are endogenous morphine-like molecules, and we call them endorphins endogenous morphines. Endocannabinoids are endogenous cannabis-like substances. And so, I have my history with God, and I have a recreational history with cannabis, and it's been a struggle always that how do I, reconcile these two? Like, I don't want to have any sort of addiction to anything or anything that I put in front of you, Dad. So how do I manage what I've learned here that I'm seeing that's probably the closest thing that we can find to a cure for cancer because it fights all 5 hallmarks simultaneously without any negative side effects. And there's been no deaths of the substance based on the plant itself. And so, like, cannabinoids started becoming where I was heading as far as helping patients, because that's where I really wanted to be at was, okay, we have this information, we have this data from the cancer literature, and I took that data and I wanted to find out more about it. So I actually went to cancer.gov, and cancer.gov is where it talks about all 5 hallmarks being affected by cannabis molecules. So I started working with this information, started sharing it, and then I had an idea to have a nonprofit. And the nonprofit I wanted to do with patients. But the problem is, of course, that my issue with cannabis is I don't want to have it before God, but also I want to be able to help these people with it. And so it's been quite a ride in trying to not balance it, but try to understand where Dad has me for in this space. Because that was the main thing. I went to him and I was like, Dad, you know my struggle here. Like, the one thing that is the most benefit for cancer is also the one thing that has tripped me up the most over my life. And he said, I need my people in this space. And that gave me the peace about it. And to be able to start working with hemp and cancer patients. So I started the nonprofit Hemp It Forward. I don't know if y'all can see it there. But basically it's the same idea as Pay It Forward, but with hemp. And so hemp products are being sold in stores all over the place, and cancer patients are buying them, but they're very expensive. And so what we're doing is we're donating hemp products to cancer patients, and it's not an exchange program, but it's a case study program. And so you continue to get free products while you fill out not session surveys, like questionnaires, weekly sessions, or weekly surveys. And so we're able to capture data from the patients for advocacy, for the politicians, and for future patients. We're able to help current patients by donating oil products to them. And then we're able to help the storefronts and other locations around us by sending the patients into those locations to be able to find the products they need at discount prices. That's not really the best summation of the nonprofit. So basically the nonprofit gives cannabis products to cancer patients during treatment only. And we collect that data, and then we give that over to the politicians and such. I guess that would be a better, faster way to say it. So if you have cancer, if you know anybody that has cancer, you can hit up hempitforward.org. It's .org, not .com. And they can apply right there. You can learn more about what we're doing and more about as far as why cancer and cannabis is something that we're focusing on. I put all the data on there from cancer.gov. And yeah, so that's what we're working on. We're helping patients. Got a lung cancer patient right now. Have another brain cancer patient. Both of them are doing better since we started them with hemp. So yeah, those are the 2 main ones right now that we have in the program. So hit us up if you got any questions. Of course, you can hit me up personally. It's Cody Guy is my handle on everything. Letter C, just the letter C, and then Cody Guy. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those places I'm at. And then Hemp It Forward is also on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you want to contact me, there's all those different ways of going about doing it.
That is awesome, man. And again, Thank you so much for just again taking one of the darkest moments in your life and the challenges that came with that, and now taking that and using it in a way to be of benefit to others who are going through similar situations, trying to give back to other people with the information that they need to have and resources that need to have available that will help them be able to fight the good fight in terms of overcoming their health conditions, but more importantly, not leaving out the importance of God being in the mix of all of that along the way. I think that is such a powerful thing that you're doing and sharing that story with others. And I'm confident that your story today, just as it's been a blessing to me, is going to bless our listeners who have a chance to hear it. So thank you, my brother, so much for your transparency, sharing this story. This is just God in the doing His work, and
Yeah.
if you can't make this stuff up. This is just
Right.
this is just who God is, and this is how this is just one of many examples out there of how He can take what just seems to be impossible to overcome and bring forth miracles, bring forth blessings, bring forth just a whole new level of understanding as to why having a relationship with God is so critical, so important, and it's not just some trend or some pass by thing that we just do just because everybody else is doing. This is serious business,
Yeah.
and your life is a perfect example of why God is essential to be a part of it, and in everything that you do, everything that you touch. And so for my listeners today, if you've enjoyed our episode, the content that we share, what we're doing here, please do subscribe, please share, please like, please comment. We would appreciate it so much. Here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is what it's all about. We're being transparent and authentic and open and sharing our journeys, our stories, our challenges, trying to connect with you in such a way with the hopes that in doing this, we are empowering, we are uplifting, we are encouraging you to let you know that no matter what you're up against, no matter what you're facing in life, nothing's too big for God. This doesn't mean that it's the end of your story, and that you can even use some of those darkest times in your life. You can use them to be a light, to be a beacon of light to other people, without even understanding it. Just a wonderful thing that in the wonderful ways that God navigates through even our darkest and most challenging times. I promise you, if you lean into Him, if you can have that relationship with Him, there's nothing too big for Him to overcome. So with that said, remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and where your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and I thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. And until next time, God bless. Keep the faith. Keep fighting. Be resilient about it. Be intentional about your relationship with Christ. And I promise you, it'll be the best decision that you will ever make. So until next time, take care of yourselves.